Welcome, curious learners, to a brand new deep dive.
Oh.
Today, we're plunging headfirst into, well, a really pivotal, though definitely dark, historical document from the early 20th century. It's a powerful compilation called Fighting the Traffic in Young Girls, or W Unknown, edited by Ernest A. He was the secretary of the Illinois Vigilance Association.
Right, a key figure in that movement.
Exactly. And this isn't, just some dusty academic text you'd find buried in an archive somewhere. No, it's a passionate, really urgent plea.
Yeah, you can feel the urgency coming off the page, even now.
Absolutely. It was co-authored by this diverse group of prominent figures from back then. Lawyers, doctors, missionaries, dedicated activists.
Yeah.
All kind of united against this horrifying evil.
It's a document that, like you said, despite its age, it still just screams with this almost visceral urgency. And our mission for this deep dive, well, it's to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from the stack of sources you've shared. We want to offer you, the listener, a shortcut to being well-informed about what is really a dark chapter in history, and also the profound, quite determined efforts that were waged to combat it.
Yeah.
It's about understanding not just what happened, but maybe why it happened, and crucially, how people fought back against it.
Absolutely. We'll be digging into the grim reality of what was chillingly known back then as the white slave trade. We'll explore its global reach, share some of the heartbreaking stories of its victims.
Which are truly difficult to read sometimes.
They really are. And we'll delve into the fierce, determined battles waged by these individuals to bring this horrific practice into the light and ultimately to try and put an end to it.
It's a story of both, immense evil, but also really inspiring courage. And it's definitely one that the authors desperately wanted the public to understand, to not look away from.
Right. Okay, so let's start by unpacking this term, white slave traffic, as they understood it back at the turn of the 20th century. Because the authors are incredibly precise here. They make it really clear it's not just immorality in general.
No. Definitely not.
They're talking about something much more specific, much more sinister than just, vice.
Yeah, you've hit on a really crucial distinction they make right from the start.
No.
What's absolutely vital to grasp here is the emphasis they place on involuntary servitude.
Okay.
The source explicitly states that white slave refers to women and girls who are actually slaves, those women who are owned and held as property and chattels, whose lives are lives of involuntary servitude.
So actual ownership.
Yeah.
Like property.
Exactly. This isn't about choice or perceived moral failings on the part of the victims. It's about brutal, forced exploitation. The authors really go out of their way to highlight that these are individuals who, as they put it, if given a fair chance, would, in all probability, have been good wives and mothers and useful citizens.
Right.
They wanted to completely strip away any potential for victim blaming and just expose it for what it was, a pure criminal enterprise. They're making it crystal clear this was systematic enslavement, absolutely not consensual activity.
And before these tireless awareness campaigns by publications and reformers started to chip away at the silence, the general public was largely, ignorant of the fact that it was becoming so extensive.
Yeah, no. Willfully ignorant, perhaps, in some cases?
Maybe. People were genuinely confused, it seems, about what the term even meant. Or perhaps, like you said, they just didn't want to believe such horrors could exist in their modern world.
Yeah, denial is powerful.
But what's undeniably clear from these sources is that this was a hugely profitable enterprise. And that immense profitability, that was precisely what fueled this rapid and horrifying increase. It was a business.
A truly dark business.
In the darkest, most exploitative sense of the word.
Yeah, and this brings up a critical question, doesn't it? If this trade was so extensive, so profitable, why was there such widespread ignorance about it?
Good question. What do the authors say?
Well, they suggest a couple of deeply interconnected reasons. Firstly, the crimes themselves were, as they say, kept secret as far as possible.
Okay, so operating in the shadows.
Right. These transactions, these brutal acts of coercion and sale, they weren't happening in broad daylight. They were meticulously hidden. But secondly, and perhaps more insidiously, the revolting details of the trade often cannot be published and ought not to be read anywhere outside of the bottomless pit.
Wow. Strong words.
Very. This societal aversion to openly discussing the brutal truth, what some reformers at the time called false modesty, paradoxically allowed the trade to flourish underground, hidden in plain sight almost.
So the discomfort actually helped the criminals.
Exactly. It was easier for society, perhaps, to ignore or deny the existence of such depravity than to confront its really uncomfortable reality. And the traffickers, they exploited that reluctance to their immense advantage.
That's a deeply disturbing thought, how societal squeamishness, that false modesty, actually aided this evil.
Yeah.
But the scope here, it isn't just confined to the early 20th century, is it? The authors themselves draw these fascinating parallels to much older histories of exploitation,
They do, yeah.
tracing crimes against womanhood all the way back to ancient Babylon. What did they highlight there, going back that far?
It's quite a powerful historical sweep they do, isn't it? They point out that in ancient Babylon, the dishonoring of girlhood was a part of the temple service.
Part of the service.
Yeah, think about that. A form of ritualized exploitation tied directly to religious practice. This practice, they detail, then spread. It went to India, among the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, Asia Minor, Greece.
Wow.
The authors even mention the famed lawgiver Solon establishing what they call houses of shame in Athens. But, and this is a critical caveat they include, there were apparently death penalties for anyone forcing freeborn girls into them.
Okay, so even then a distinction was made.
Exactly. It shows this historical awareness that even way back then, there was this tension between the existence of such places and, legal attempts to protect certain citizens from forced entry into them.
So if this evil is, as they say, as old as sin, what's the fundamental recurring lesson these historical examples teach us about confronting it? What pattern do we keep seeing?
Well, the pattern is, frankly, painfully clear. The exploitation of women in its various forms, it really is as old as sin itself, and it just keeps evolving through different eras. Adapting. Precisely. The core insight here seems to be this enduring tension between legal and moral attempts to suppress it, and then this persistent governmental or societal complicity, or maybe just inertia, that allows it to adapt and persist.
Right.
We see figures like Emperor Theodosius II, who apparently laid heavy penalties on traffickers, showing that even ancient empires recognized the need for some kind of top-down legal enforcement, even if it was often temporary. Then you have Justinian, around 527, actually punishing procurers with death. That demonstrates a recognition of the extreme nature of the crime. And Charlemagne, way later in 800, scourged those who kept these houses of shame.
So repeated attempts by powerful rulers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yet despite these powerful efforts across millennia, the problem just persisted. It morphed, it found new avenues to operate. It really underscores how deeply ingrained this kind of exploitation can become, even when facing strong opposition.
And then the authors bring us crashing into the modern era, relatively speaking, with a stark comparison. Paris, the modern Babylon.
Yeah, they really don't hold back there.
No, they absolutely pin the blame on Paris as the source and headquarters of the worldwide white slave trade of the present time, as they saw it.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that jump, and why single out Paris so strongly?
It's a powerful indictment, isn't it? They saw Paris not just as a city of vice, which was a common trope, but as the actual engine of this modernized, industrialized evil.
Industrialized.
Well, what really struck me in the sources was how they described Paris as having refined vice into a fine art. That phrasing suggests something more than just random bad behavior. It implies a level of sophistication, of systemization.
Like a business model.
Exactly. They felt Paris had, in a sense, industrialized it, created a blueprint, a systematized commercial enterprise for this trade, making it efficient, widespread, and tragically, a global model for exploitation. This wasn't just, old school depravity. This felt like a new, frighteningly efficient business of human trafficking.
Okay, so we've talked about the scope and the history, this long, dark history. But who are the actual individuals, these depraved mortals, as the book calls them, who are running this trade? The source describes them in just the most scathing terms, more unspeakably low and vile than any other class of criminals, calls them human vultures, often recruited from the scum of the criminal classes of Europe. But crucially, it's not just a French problem, right? What does the book say about the diversity, the international nature of these perpetrators?
Yeah, it really challenges any simplistic view. Like, it was just one nationality or one type of person. The sources make it absolutely clear this was a truly international network.
Okay.
So while Paris might have been seen as the headquarters, the traffickers themselves came from all corners. Many were Jews, many are Italians and Sicilians, some are Austrians, Germans, English, Americans, Greeks. It covers a huge range.
So truly global.
It wasn't a localized gang, it was a transnational criminal syndicate. And what's particularly chilling is how the authors describe their setup. They had, quote, the complete outfit of a large business, large capital, representatives in various countries, well-paid agents, and able high-salaried lawyers.
High-salaried lawyers. What?
Right. So maybe less scum of the earth in their organization and more like, well, evil CEOs. It sounds almost disturbingly professional, disturbingly efficient.
That's a chilling observation, the sheer professionalism of their operation. They're described as organically criminal, often willing to just pay heavy fines rather than face any real jail time. That detail alone tells you so much about the immense profitability that kept this whole nefarious system running, doesn't it? This wasn't petty crime.
Not at all. It was big business, meticulously planned and executed apparently with a legal team on retainer, ready to handle the fallout. Fines were just a cost of doing business.
Just factored in.
Yeah, a small tax on their substantial profits. It really shows how deeply entrenched and economically powerful these syndicates were. They felt untouchable to a degree.
Okay, so these were sophisticated international criminals operating like a dark corporation. But how did they actually operate on the ground? Let's unpack the insidious methods they use to ensnare their victims.
Right, the tactics.
The book says they would drug, to make drunken, to deceive, to ensnare, or to debauch by force. The innocent, the confiding, the thoughtless, the weak, a whole range of coercion. But what seems truly insidious, and frankly heartbreaking, is the widespread use of false promises.
Yeah.
They preyed on hopes and ambitions, didn't they? Often quite effectively.
It's the weaponization of innocent aspirations that makes their methods so utterly depraved. You ask what kinds of promises were most effective. Well, the sources detail how they'd offer excellent positions in the city.
Like legitimate jobs.
Seemingly, yes. Sometimes in stores or laundries or maybe as governesses. For young women looking for independence, maybe escaping poverty, or just wanting a better life than what their rural or limited circumstances offered, these were incredibly appealing prospects.
Exactly.
But the stage or theatrical route was apparently particularly effective. Preying on stage struck girls with promises of large pay and becoming an embryo actress.
The glamour of the stage.
Exactly. They would falsely parade under the theatrical mask, often using disreputable agencies or individuals who posed as reputable managers. This allowed them to ensnare so many ambitious but maybe naive young women who dreamed of a different, more exciting life.
You know, there's an example you pulled from the sources that really brings this specific tactic to life. It's the story of two young girls from a Chicago department store.
That one stood out.
They were approached, flattered about their beauty, and promised this, well, princely sum back then, of $25 a week to go on stage, offered by a well-dressed woman.
$25 a week was a fortune then.
Absolutely. Easily enough to turn a young woman's head, make her believe in this dream. But instead of a legitimate theater, they were led to this place, described as having a saloon in the front and a vaudeville in the rear, and upstairs a most awful place.
Just horrific deception.
Totally. Thankfully, just by pure chance, they were saved by a good-hearted Scotch woman who overheard something and alerted the authorities.
Yeah.
But this incident alone, it gives you a sense of the scale of the fight. It cost the Chicago Law and Order League and the state of Illinois not less than $2,000 just for the prosecution and rescue related to these two girls.
Wow. $2,000 back then. That's a huge amount.
It really highlights the immense effort and resources required to pull even one person out of this abyss.
It truly shows the cost, both human and financial. And then there's another tactic, perhaps even more psychologically devastating, the so-called love method.
Yes, this one is particularly cruel.
This is where it becomes just truly heartbreaking and a testament to the criminal's fiendish cunning, as the book puts it. Procurers would cultivate the most captivating manners. They'd express fondness for church and prayer meetings.
Playing the part of the ideal suitor.
Exactly. Appearing devout, charming, respectable, they would then meticulously court these girls, often proposing elopements or even staging mock marriages to gain their absolute trust and, crucially, remove them from the protection of their homes and families.
A complete betrayal.
Total betrayal of the most intimate human emotions. Calculated manipulation.
And the example of Estelle Ramon from Kentucky. It's just a devastating narrative that embodies this cruel tactic. Perfect.
It really does.
A handsome man, claiming to be an artist from Cincinnati, woos her. He even convinces her mother of his importance, his noble intentions, and then he marries Estelle.
Gaining the family's trust completely.
Completely. He then takes her to Cleveland, and in this truly cruel twist, he abandons her in a house of ill fame. Yeah. And he confesses He tells her he married her purely for the $8,000 her family received from her father's life insurance.
Oh, that's just vile.
Money he then promptly took, having apparently only paid $50 for her to the madam of the house. The aftermath is equally tragic. Her mother goes insane from grief and shame. Estelle is held captive until, almost miraculously, she's rescued by her childhood sweetheart, William Scott, who had apparently searched relentlessly for her for months.
It sounds like something out of a melodrama, but it was terrifyingly real for these women.
Exactly.
And the mechanism of these fake marriages itself, the book describes it in chilling detail. It really illustrates the depth of the corruption involved.
How do they make them seem real?
Well, these mock marriages were performed with accomplices on every hand. Sometimes a crooked notary public would go through a perfunctory form of marriage, but then intentionally fail to file the agreement, rendering it legally null and void.
So the victims thought they were married, but legally weren't.
Precisely. And in some even more perverse instances, these corrupt notaries would actually advise the procurers on how to accuse the child wife, as they sometimes were, of adultery to secure a quick divorce after taking her money or inheritance.
Unbelievable collusion.
It highlights a sickening collusion of criminals, preying on legal illiteracy and creating this web of betrayal that left the victims completely disoriented, trapped, and often without any legal recourse.
It paints a picture of a truly comprehensive criminal system, exploiting every vulnerability. And these human vultures, they weren't just lurking in the dark corners of the city, were they? They were everywhere.
Seemingly everywhere, yes. Constantly seeking out new victims.
The source warns, interestingly, that the country girl is in greater danger from the white slavers than the city girl. Why was that the case? And what specific environments did they target?
That's a critical insight from the sources, isn't it? The perception was that the country girl was more vulnerable because she was typically less sophisticated, more trusting, and more open to the allurements that were constantly being put before them.
Lacked street smarts, maybe?
Essentially, yes. They maybe didn't have the cynical awareness to recognize the danger lurking beneath a polite invitation or a seemingly kind offer. And what stands out in the sources are the specific locations where these predators operated, often targeting girls who were in transit, alone, or seemed unsure.
Like where?
They frequented railway stations, ports of embarkation, places of arrival where watchers or agents would specifically target girls evidently unused to city ways. Their innocence was practically a beacon for these people.
So travel hubs were key danger zones.
Definitely. But the net was cast far wider. They also frequented 5-cent theaters, public dance halls, skating rinks, moving picture arcades, saloons with wine rooms, and even department stores.
Department stores, too.
Yes. The system was seemingly so pervasive that, as the book says, almost all positions alluring to young girls have been used to catch them, turning everyday places into potential traps.
And we even hear about this specific tactic, the cutting out process, described by Harry A. Parkin, who was an assistant United States District Attorney at the time.
Right. That was a specific train station tactic.
This is where procurers would make the girl's acquaintance, gaining her confidence and, on one pretext or another, inducing her to leave the train before the main depot is reached.
Why before?
They did this specifically to avoid law enforcement and the protective organizations, like the Travelers Aid Society, that often had watchers stationed at the main terminals trained to spot girls who looked lost or in danger.
Ah, so it was a calculated evasion.
Exactly. A deliberate evasion of the safety nets that were starting to be put in place. A real cat and mouse game played with human lives.
It was indeed. They were always adapting, always finding new ways to bypass the fledgling systems of protection. And another particularly insidious tactic involved the figure of the kindly elderly lady.
That sounds so counterintuitive.
Doesn't it? But these were often semi-retired brothel keepers who would run what appeared to be a respectable home for working girls, often in sumptuously furnished flats.
Offering comfort and safety, seemingly?
Exactly. They'd offer luxury, companionship, comfort, often at little or no expense, preying on loneliness and a desire for a respectable, comfortable life away from hardship. The idea, the trap, was that girls would be caught unawares and so compromised that she dare not face her home folks again once her reputation was soiled, whether through trickery or coercion.
Trapped by shame.
Precisely. It was a sophisticated psychological trap, turning apparent hospitality into a prison, leveraging social stigma and shame to keep victims silent and compliant.
So once entrapped, what was life actually like for these victims inside these places, these dens of shame? The source paints this truly chilling picture of Hopeless slavery and degradation.
It's grim reading.
Girls had their street clothes seized. They were forced into these parlor dresses, which were essentially uniforms identifying them, and then held captive by this diabolical system of debt.
Yes, the debt bondage.
It was a psychological and physical prison, just designed to break their will entirely.
And what's fascinating here, in a deeply disturbing way, is the chilling detail provided by that anonymous white slave trader in her confession within the book.
What does she say?
She recounts, "My promised salary was always in arrears and I was penniless with nowhere to go and no friends." Now, while the police often claim this debt system was abolished, she states that a sort of fiction is maintained where the dive keepers, the brothel owners, would pretend to be merely agents for storekeepers who provided clothes or lodging.
Making the debt seem legitimate but external.
Exactly. But she says the debt was nonetheless real. Girls were manipulated, made to believe that it is lawful to keep them captive because of this fabricated debt. And cruelly, they were often completely cowed into submission by witnessing the brutal punishment of other girls who tried to escape.
So violence enforced the debt.
Absolutely. It was a system built on terror and psychological manipulation, where the illusion of legality and the very real threat of violence kept victims utterly trapped.
And there's an incredibly grim illustrative example from the sources that really brings this abstract concept of debt slavery into stark reality.
A 14-year-old girl.
Just 14. Horrifying.
Described as rated as uncommonly attractive, she was sold into a Chicago house of ill fame. She was quickly and unceremoniously broken in. Just a horrifying euphemism.
Unspeakable.
And then, after nights of forced servitude, she was compelled to scrub the entire house from top to bottom, like adding insult to injury.
Degradation upon degradation.
In just 2.5 years, the source estimates she earned not less than $8,000 and probably $10,000 for her owners. A staggering sum, yet she was not even given $1 to spend for her own comfort or pleasure.
Nothing. She was kept locked in her room to prevent her possible escape. And the sources emphasize the only time she ever left the house was in the dead of night, escorted by her madam, specifically to avoid detection or rescue. This wasn't just exploitation, it was outright enslavement. Absolute dehumanization.
Equally horrifying and just a stark warning to anyone who might even think about resisting is the story of the mutilated Italian girl.
Oh, that one is brutal.
She was 16, a peasant girl, promised a role as a companion in America. Instead, she was met by these brutal traffickers. After incurring a $600 debt for her passage and initial upkeep, she was suddenly told she owed another $400 for a dress she never even received.
Just fabricating more debt.
Right. In a desperate act, she made a dash for liberty, but they caught her. She was slashed with a razor, one gash straight through her right eye, one across her cheek, and another slitting her ear.
Dear God.
Her face was described as horribly mutilated, and her right eye remained always open, a permanent grotesque testament to the violence she suffered. This extreme disfigurement served as a terrifying, brutal warning to all the other girls, ensuring their compliance through sheer terror. It just underscored the barbaric lengths these traffickers would go to maintain control.
The prognosis for these girls trapped in this life was just grim, wasn't it? The examination of witnesses has brought out the fact that not many of the women in this class expect to live more than 10 years.
10 years? A death sentence, almost.
The average life expectancy was, chillingly, perhaps even less than that. These were truly short, brutal lives, defined by suffering, and it seems often ending in utter despair.
Indeed. The authors state quite baldly that many died painful deaths by disease, many by consumption, tuberculosis, but it is hardly beyond the truth to say that suicide is their general expectation.
Their expectation. That's haunting.
It is. As one witness, a victim herself, remarked while in jail, with this haunting resignation, "We all come to it sooner or later." It paints a picture of such profound, inescapable hopelessness.
Yeah.
The story of Daisy, an orphan mentioned in the book, who died in a poorhouse before she even reached age 20 from a loathsome disease, as they put it. It highlights this tragic, often forgotten end. Her madam apparently showed a flicker of remorse at the end, but felt unable to escape this partnership with hell, as she called it.
Trapped herself in a way.
Perhaps. Another story, Helen Chambers, a promising high school student lured into heavy drinking and then morphine use by her captors, died at just 18. It just emphasizes the rapid, destructive nature of this life. These weren't just statistics, these were individual young lives, brutally extinguished.
And beyond the immense individual tragedy, the white slave trade had these horrifying societal consequences, didn't it? particularly in the realm of public health.
Oh, absolutely. A major focus.
The source doesn't pull any punches, emphasizing that all lewd women are diseased some of the time, and some lewd women are diseased all of the time. This wasn't just framed as a moral failing. It was presented as a public health catastrophe that touched far, far beyond the victims themselves.
And what's deeply alarming here, and where the authors really bring in the scientific weight of their argument, is the medical detail they present. They include testimony from professors at places like Rush Medical College and Northwestern University Medical School.
So, respected medical authorities of the day.
Yes. They assert that 1/7 of the suffering of the human race at that time was caused by these venereal diseases. They note that in New York City hospitals, a shocking 65% of operations to remove ovaries were due to gonorrheal infection.
65%. That's staggering.
It is. They painstakingly detail how gonorrhea, often dismissed by the uninformed back then as no worse than a cold, could lead to lifelong debilitating health issues, including pelvic inflammatory disease, chronic pain, female infertility, and was responsible for 25% of the blindness of children due to transmission during birth.
Blindness in newborns.
Exactly. And syphilis, which infects the blood, could be transmitted even by a kiss. Its most serious results, they warned, often appeared years after its acquisition, leading to devastating neurological conditions like apoplexy, paralysis, insanity, and locomotor ataxia.
Terrible long-term consequences.
And crucially, it could be passed on to children, causing inherited disease before birth or resulting in a brief and sickly span of life. This perpetuated immense suffering across generations. The silence, the false modesty we talked about earlier, wasn't just morally damaging, it was medically catastrophic for society as a whole.
And the deep dive highlights a particularly powerful and moving plea from none other than Helen Keller.
Yes, her articles are very influential.
Despite her own profound challenges, she became this fierce advocate on this issue. In her January 1909 article in the Ladies' Home Journal, titled I Must Speak, she directly links the most common cause of blindness, which was ophthalmia of the newborn, directly to venereal disease.
Connecting the dots publicly.
Precisely. This disease, she explains plainly, is transmitted from husband to wife, and then tragically to the child, often completely unknowingly by the mother or even the father sometimes. It's just a powerful testament to the far-reaching and utterly innocent victims of this trade and its associated public health crisis. It exposed how this hidden suffering could ripple out and devastate even the most vulnerable members of society.
So after hearing all that horror, it's almost hard to imagine how this could have stayed hidden for so long. But as you said, it wasn't always hidden, was it? Gradually, things started to change.
Right. The pulpit and the press, as the book puts it, slowly but surely began speaking out, starting to break through that thick wall of silence and denial. And then you had major publications stepping up. Woman's World, for instance, which had this astounding circulation back then of over 2 million subscribers. They printed fully 50 million pages on the issue. 50 million.
Wow. The reach of that is incredible.
This massive media exposure was absolutely key. It was essential to breaking the seal of secrecy that had protected the traffickers for far too long.
It really was a turning point, wasn't it? It underscores the essential role of public awareness in combating such a deeply entrenched evil. You know, that statement by Edwin W. Sims, the United States District Attorney in Chicago, is particularly striking because it captures the prevailing ignorance so well.
What did he say again?
He said, I sincerely believe that 9/10 of the parents have no idea that there is really a trade in the ruin of girls as much as there is a trade in cattle or sheep or other products of the farm.
Comparing it to livestock trading. So.
Yeah, incredibly stark. His goal, and the goal of many reformers, was plain speech to parents, as they put it, to make them realize the horrifying truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. Because without that awareness, without shattering that false modesty, protective measures were simply impossible. You really can't fight a monster you don't even believe exists.
That's a powerful way to put it. And the scale of the problem, being international, clearly demanded more than just local or even national efforts, right? It was a global crime.
It absolutely required a global response.
So this is where it gets incredibly impressive, I think. This figure, Alexander Coote, described having a sweet and holy vision, as the book says, that led directly to this massive international effort. How did that come about? What did it actually achieve?
It's truly a testament to the power of collective will, isn't it? Spurred by Coote's advocacy and others, this vision ultimately resulted in the International Agreement for the Suppression of the White Slave Traffic. It was drafted in Paris, ironically, in July 1902.
Paris, the modern Babylon itself.
The very same. Imagine the diplomatic feat. 16 countries sent 36 delegates. They deliberated for 5 intense days, bridging linguistic and cultural divides, to create what they proudly called a woman's charter of moral liberty.
A woman's charter. Powerful framing.
Very. And incredibly, it was then accepted by all the countries of Europe and by North and South America. This marked a truly unprecedented global commitment to tackle an issue that had, until then, largely been ignored or treated as just a local police matter. This agreement provided that crucial framework for coordinated international action, which was desperately needed to confront a trade that respected no borders whatsoever.
And within this international agreement, there were concrete, really actionable clauses, weren't there? Article 2, for instance.
Yes, Article 2 was key.
It mandated a watch kept, especially at railway stations, ports of embarkation, and en route for persons in charge of women and girls destined for an immoral life. And its implementation in Britain apparently saw lady workers, volunteers with language skills, meaning something like 16,000 young women arriving at ports and stations.
16,000.
And remarkably, they estimated they saved 40% from peril, just by providing information, support, and safe passage options. Organizations like Les Amis de la Jeune Fille, which was Protestant, the International Catholic Association, and various national committees formed this incredible network of agencies across Europe. It shows the power of organized, multi-denominational collaboration in practical, on-the-ground rescue and prevention efforts.
A real united front. And the cooperation didn't stop there. Article 5 focused specifically on the repatriation of victims. Governments actually undertook to identify and send foreign prostitutes back to their home countries, entrusting destitute victims to public or private charitable institutions upon their return.
So trying to offer a pass back.
Exactly, a humanitarian effort aimed at restoring dignity and offering a path to recovery, recognizing that simply rescuing someone wasn't the end of the story. They needed support, a way back to a life.
Makes sense.
And then there's Article 6, which tackled the problem of employment agencies. This recognized that the Servants Registry Office has, like the railway station, been too ready a means in the hands of the unscrupulous traders.
Another pipeline for trafficking.
Exactly. So governments agreed to exercise supervision over the offices or agencies engaged in finding employment for women or girls abroad. This aimed to close a significant loophole that traffickers had been ruthlessly exploiting for years. These articles together show a really quite comprehensive approach. Prevention, identification, rescue, repatriation, and regulating the systems that enabled the trade.
So while these crucial international efforts were gaining traction, back on the other side of the Atlantic, in the U.S., organizations like the Illinois Vigilance Association, headed by our editor Ernest A, and groups like the Midnight Mission, were fighting these battles on the ground, right in the thick of it in cities like Chicago.
The local fight was vital.
Reverend Milburn P. Boynton describes his own personal journey. He started out skeptical about the whole trade, thinking it was just sensationalism.
Which was a common reaction.
Right. But then he got involved, started leading street meetings right in the vice districts, and witnessed the horrors firsthand, becoming a fervent activist. What challenges did these national and local activists face in their own communities? It wasn't easy, was it?
No, it's easy to assume everyone would immediately rally to such a cause. But you're right, the challenges were immense. Public incredulity, disbelief was a major hurdle. Charles N. Crittenton, who was a prominent philanthropist funding rescue homes, recounts how his own friends literally thought he had gone crazy for believing girls were actually being held in slavery against their will.
He just couldn't accept it.
People simply couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, believe it was happening in their own cities, on their own streets. And again, that concept of false modesty played a huge role, as described by Clifford G. Rowe, another key prosecutor. It was this ingrained cultural resistance, this deep reluctance to even speak about the problem openly, that deterred many well-meaning people from fighting the white slave evil. It kept the topic taboo. This cultural barrier was almost as difficult to overcome as the criminals themselves.
And the legal battles they faced were incredibly complex too, weren't they?
Yeah.
Full of loopholes and setbacks.
Oh, absolutely. A constant struggle. The U.S. Immigration Act of 1907, for example, aimed to stop the importation of alien women specifically for prostitution. And U.S. District Attorney Sims did manage some prosecutions under it.
Right.
But then a Supreme Court decision came along and significantly limited its scope. The ruling required prosecutors to prove that the defendant specifically imported the girl, not just that they were harboring or exploiting her after she arrived.
Making it much harder to prosecute.
Much harder for existing cases, yes. It effectively created a huge loophole and necessitated entirely new legislation to cover interstate trafficking, which eventually led to the Mann Act.
Right, and on the state level.
On the state level, you had laws like Illinois' Pandering Act, passed in 1908 and strengthened in 1909. This aimed to criminalize the act of procuring and keeping inmates in houses of prostitution. And in a truly radical step for the time, it even included a provision compelling wives to testify against their procurer husbands.
Wow, that must have been controversial.
Highly! Yet even with progressive laws like that, you had outdated laws still on the books in other states, like Massachusetts. Their laws included phrases requiring the victim to be of previously chaste character.
Punishing the victim, essentially.
Exactly. It created these terrible loopholes, effectively penalizing victims who might have already been victimized or made one mistake, making them ineligible for legal protection. It was a constant legislative tug-of-war, with progress often met by new legal obstacles or interpretations.
For a real cat-and-mouse game on the legal front, too.
Precisely. But despite all these hurdles, there was incredibly powerful direct action and rescue work happening. Groups like the Midnight Mission weren't afraid to go right into the heart of the vice districts. They held open-air meetings, bringing their message directly to the women trapped there and to the men who frequented those areas.
Confronting it head-on.
Absolutely. They even conducted thorough canvasses of the red light district to distribute leaflets printed with the Illinois Anti-Pandering statute, boldly declaring, "No white slave need remain in slavery in the state of Abraham Lincoln, who made the black slaves free."
Invoking Lincoln. Powerful symbolism.
Very. It was a direct appeal, promising liberation and legal protection. And they partnered directly with the police when they could find willing officers to conduct rescues. Like the case mentioned where Mr. O.H. Richards, an investigator with police help, physically rescued a girl being held for a mere $20 debt for clothes she likely never even wanted. It showed the tangible, immediate results of their fearless, hands-on efforts.
And what's particularly fascinating here, especially thinking about urban policy debates that still happen today, is the concrete evidence the authors present against the idea of segregation.
Ah, yes, the containment theory.
The belief that concentrating vice in one designated area, a red light district, would somehow contain it and protect the rest of the city. Des Moines, Iowa is the key example here.
Right. They had tried it for a long time.
For 20 years, they'd practiced segregation, maintaining an official red light district. But then, in September 1908, they took the bold step of completely abolishing it.
What happened?
Well, the police chief at the time, A.G. Miller, concluded quite definitively that segregation never segregated. Instead, he argued, it acted as a center from which prostitution radiated in every direction like a cancer. It promoted crime, corruption, and had a baleful influence in business and politics.
So it made things worse, not better.
According to him, yes. And remarkably, its abolition reportedly led to a remarkable freedom of the city from crime, and even spurred a boom in residents in city real estate as those areas improved. It was presented as powerful, real-world evidence that confronting vice head-on, rather than tacitly allowing it to flourish in designated zones, actually yielded tangible and positive societal benefits. A direct rebuttal to the segregation argument.
You know, throughout this book, the authors don't pull any punches when it comes to accountability, do they? Especially accountability of those in power?
Not at all. They consider it false patriotism to allow the crimes of one's own country to go without rebuke. And they issue this really stark warning against what they call the unpardonable sin of betraying public trust, especially in matters of public health and morals.
It's framed as a profound moral failure.
Absolutely. This isn't just a legal fight for them, it's a deep moral imperative.
And it's a direct, fiery challenge to that whole idea that authorities could or even should try to regulate sin. They actually quote John Milton to back this up.
Milton, what's the quote?
Milton wrote, "When the law fails to regulate sin and not to take it utterly away, it necessarily confirms and establishes sin."
Wow. So regulating equals enabling, in their view.
That's the argument. It's a complete refutation of any notion that vice could be safely controlled or managed through official tolerance or segregation. And it also directly targets what they call the devil's dogma, that prostitution is a protection to virtue.
Ah, that old argument. that having fallen women somehow protects good women.
Exactly. A widespread and incredibly insidious belief at the time. They vehemently refute this, stating plainly that good women are 1,000 times safer where no such hells exist to manufacture degenerates. They argued that vice didn't protect virtue, it actively destroyed it, creating a constant churn of new victims and corrupting society at its very core. It's a powerful moral and social argument they're making.
So given this unrelenting moral stance and their deep, hard-won understanding of the problem's mechanics, what does this all mean for continued action? What were they demanding?
Well, the book lays out very clear, quite comprehensive demands for sweeping legislative reform. They weren't just pointing fingers, they had a plan.
Like what specifically?
Things like more severe penalties for first-time offenders involved in trafficking. Removing arbitrary age limits from laws that sometimes protected older, more experienced procurers. Strengthening federal laws to tackle interstate traffic more effectively, which, as we mentioned, led towards the Mann Act. And establishing public bureaus of information.
Public bureaus. What for?
To track girls reported missing or known to be in disreputable houses. These were intended to be systematic solutions for a systemic problem.
Right, because the secrecy was so key to the traffickers' success.
Absolutely crucial. The authors understood acutely that secrecy is maintained as to who the girls are and where they are from, and this profoundly aided the traffickers, making it impossible for families or authorities to find them. These public bureaus were meant to break that secrecy, to create a central registry.
Makes sense. What else?
They also advocated strongly for laws punishing anyone who would knowingly accept or receive, in whole or in part, support or maintenance from the proceeds or earnings of any woman engaged in prostitution.
Going after the pimps, the exploiters.
Exactly. Targeting the financial beneficiaries. They estimated back then that at least 1/4 of Chicago's estimated 5,000 prostitutes supported these male parasites, as they called them, who would fall directly under such a law. It was a direct strike at the financial engine of exploitation.
And beyond legislation.
Beyond just laws, they stressed the profound need for sex education at home, for parents to actually inform their children about the awful physical as well as the moral consequences of vice and the dangers lurking out there. They saw it as a multi-pronged fight. Tough legal enforcement combined with vital preventative education starting in the family.
Which brings us back to something you see woven throughout this entire document. The profound issue of parental responsibility.
Yes, it's a constant refrain.
In fact, the most impactful cause of girls' ruin is repeatedly cited by various contributors as simply parental inefficiency. That's a stark, pretty challenging conclusion for any parent then or now to consider.
It is stark, isn't it? But it brings us back to the most fundamental level of protection. What stands out here is the urgent, almost desperate call for alert, constant, and intelligent protection for young girls, especially during vulnerable times like what they quaintly called summer silliness.
Summer silliness.
Yeah, apparently times when vigilance might lapse and when runaway marriages, those fake elopements, were a favorite trick of the white slaver preying on youthful impulsiveness or naivety.
Okay.
Mothers and fathers are just implored, begged almost, to not trust any man who pretends to take an interest in your girl if that interest involves her leaving her own roof. They are urged to know their daughter's surroundings, their associates, to actively engage in their lives, and even if she absolutely must move to the city for work or opportunity, to go with her yourself if possible.
Be physically present.
Yes. This, they argue, is the highest form of loyalty a parent can offer proactive safeguarding. It's a call to profound vigilance, recognizing that a parent's awareness and involvement is often the first and potentially the strongest line of defense against these predators.
Wow. This deep dive into fighting the traffic in young girls. It really reveals such a chilling portrait of this widespread, systematized evil that preyed so ruthlessly on the vulnerable. But at the same time, it illuminates this powerful, multifaceted crusade for justice and human dignity that rose up to fight it.
Both sides of the coin.
From the truly harrowing personal stories of survival and tragic loss, to those monumental international agreements we discussed, and the tireless, dangerous work of the activists, the lawyers, the physicians on the ground. It's just crystal clear that this battle was fought on so many fronts, with incredible courage and this unwavering commitment to exposing the truth.
I think the enduring strength of this historical document lies right there, in its unwavering demand for truth. Even when that truth is absolutely revolting and deeply uncomfortable to confront, it highlights the incredible power of collective action when people finally decide enough is enough. It shows the absolute necessity of breaking silence, of challenging that false modesty that allows evil to fester, and the profound impact of individual vigilance, whether it's a parent, an activist, or just a concerned citizen.
Right.
It really compels us to consider how societal ignorance, or maybe just convenient indifference, and even seemingly small legal loopholes can perpetuate immense suffering. And it shows how essential it is to fight for justice, not just with the carnal weapons, as they put it, the laws and public opinion, but also with the armory of God, that deep moral conviction that human dignity is absolutely non-negotiable.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listeners, today? As you reflect on this journey we've taken into a hidden, often ignored part of history, maybe consider this. The authors repeatedly emphatically state that the white slaver's success is accomplished by secrecy.
Secrecy is their shield.
Exactly. They urge us, plead with us across the decades to drag the monster from underground and let the light of day show upon it. So the question for us today might be, what monsters in our modern world might still be lurking in the shadows of public ignorance, or perhaps a modern form of false modesty, just waiting for us to shine a light on them? And what role do we have in demanding that truth be told, even, and perhaps especially, when it's difficult or uncomfortable to hear?